Like it or not, this is what liberty looks like.
News: Supreme Court rules government can't restrict gun rights for casual drug use. The Supreme Court on Thursday barred the government from restricting the gun rights of casual drug users in a case involving a Texas man who occasionally consumed marijuana. In a 9-0 vote, the court concluded that the government's invocation of the law fell afoul of the Constitution's Second Amendment when it was used against Ali Daniel Khamenei. The law makes it a crime for any person who is an unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance to possess a firearm. It is the same statute that Hunter Biden, the son of former President Joe Biden, was convicted under in June 2024 before his father pardoned him. Those prosecuted under the law can face up to 15 years in prison and a permanent ban on owning firearms. Federal prosecutors brought the charges against Khamenei after the FBI found a handgun during a search of his home in 2022. The ruling, authored by Justice Neil Gorsuch, does not invalidate the law across the board, but it makes it harder for prosecutors to invoke it, especially as it relates to casual drug users. Gorsuch wrote that the ruling is a narrow one, which does not address broader issues raised about banning drug addicts from possessing firearms. The court rejected the federal government's claim that anyone who uses marijuana is a danger to others, all based on the government's own assessment, he added. We appreciate drugs and guns can sometimes make for a dangerous mix, Gorsuch wrote, but the government's reliance on historical laws that disarmed habitual drunkards misses the mark, he added. An added wrinkle in the case is that millions of Americans regularly use marijuana, which is legally available in many states even as it remains criminalized under federal law. The Supreme Court's 6-3 conservative majority often backs gun rights. In a major 2022 case, they expanded the right to bear arms outside the home. The court set a new test for analyzing long-standing gun restrictions, setting off a wave of new litigation in lower courts. The court has sent a strong message that the government cannot criminalize the conduct of large numbers of people. The court has sent a strong message that the government cannot criminalize the conduct of large numbers of people by making categorical and unfounded assumptions about whether they are dangerous. Cecilia Wang, legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union, which represented Khamenei, said in a statement. In future cases, prosecutors would need to show more than just drug use alone and instead provide evidence that the defendant is a danger to the public as a result of consuming such illegal substances, said William Sack, a lawyer at the Second Amendment Foundation, a gun rights group.
Now, for those of you that don't know me, I love smoking trees and I love the Second Amendment. I mean, realistically, I just love liberty. And you know, for all the accusations of fascism and dictatorship and totalitarianism and all the things that they like to accuse Donald Trump of being, I just have to point out that I can't think of a single tyrant in the history of man that has gone out of their way to arm the populace of the nation, state, country, empire, whatever it is that they're ruling over. And in case you hadn't noticed, the Second Amendment is absolutely flourishing under Donald Trump's presidency. This isn't the only win that we've had recently. In fact, an entire wing of the Civil Rights Department of the DOJ has now been created specifically and solely for the defense of our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. We are currently watching the whole rotten edifice of civilian disarmament collapse under Donald Trump's DOJ. Now, joy and celebration set aside, this video isn't for the leftist gun grabbers that want to disarm we the people of the United States so that they can execute their tyrannical, governmental dreams. No, this is more so for the people on the right that consider themselves conservative, that think that the government should have right, ability, power, scope to interject into people's personal lives on such a intimate and individual level. Because you see, those are the people that have prevented me from ever referring to myself as a conservative. Because in the 80s, late 70s, when the GOP took hold of the Republican Party, they replaced government conservatism with religious and moral conservatism that they then tried to foist on the rest of the people. That is not conservatism. You forcing your morality, your ethics, your religion is not conservative. Conservatism, with respects to political power, means a small, limited government. And in no way can a small, limited government wage a drug war the way that the United States government has for the last 70-some odd years. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that people should be out there messing around. I really wish people weren't doing fent, overdosing in the streets. Don't get me wrong by any means. I'm not necessarily supporting the use of these substances. What I am supporting is not throwing people in jail until they have
actually aggressed upon somebody's rights or property.
You know, it's for the same reason I didn't support the trans ban after, you know, that attack earlier in the year when people started, you know, talking about it, discussing it, acting like it was a good idea. Because I don't believe in punishing people that haven't done harm yet, regardless of what they're doing in their personal lives, whether they're trans, whether they use substances recreationally. There is no reason to disarm people simply because you do not like the way they practice their personal life. You know, the entire foundation of our nation, our criminal justice system, our law is innocent until proven guilty. And people take that at face value to mean that you have a right to defend yourself and we can't put you in jail until you've been proven to have broken the law. But underlying that idea is the idea that you haven't committed a crime until you have harmed somebody. The entire point of the founding of this nation was individual sovereignty, the ability to choose your life as you see fit. And just to be clear, because some idiot's going to make assumptions, not listen to what I said, put words in my mouth, I'm not saying that these people that use these substances should be allowed to just litter the streets of our major cities with not only their garbage and needles and, in fact, bodies. No, when you litter, you should go to jail. If you litter a potentially toxic substance, you should go to jail for longer. If you are passing out on the streets, you should be taken off the streets. You should be punished in some way, shape, or form for using these substances irresponsibly and putting that irresponsibility on your fellow Americans, no doubt. But if you haven't harmed anyone, if you're minding your own business, doing some bumps in your driveway in your car with a buddy, and the police pull up, there is no reason that you should be going to jail for that. There's no reason the government should have the power to interject into your personal life and tell you that because you have chosen to partake in this or that substance, that you are now going to jail or paying some sort of large fine or in any other way having your life ruined by the state, your life that was otherwise possibly going just fine. And this is something else that we need to make very clear. Simply because an individual chooses to use substances other than alcohol to inebriate themselves does not make them irresponsible, does not make them violent. Matter of fact, if you actually look at the studies, the only compound substance that we have a verifiable causal link with increased violence is, in fact, alcohol. And you say, tweakers, you know, they do all sorts of crazy stuff. If you understand chemistry in any way, shape, or form, and you look into this, you can actually see that the deregulated black market is responsible in large part for the negative consequences we see of, well, the drug war at large. I mean, whether we're talking about amphetamines, in which case the issue is that production method has shifted over the last couple decades due to the locking down of ephedrine, one of the main base ingredients of that compound, and switching over to what is called a P2 synth. What this P2 synth does, though, is produces a compound with an isometric difference, and that different isomer, I know I'm getting into chemistry here, but that different isomer is what is largely causing these large negative consequences that we see when, you know, these people lose their minds and stuff like that. You can see on a graph as ephedra-based amphetamines are seized by the federal government and P2 produced compound is flooded into the United States, you can watch a 1-for-1 increase in violent crime, psychosis of these users. And it's the same thing with fent, you know. I'm not a fan of opiates. I don't think people should be doing them recreationally. But I'm not their mother. I'm not their father. And neither is the government, and neither are you. If someone chooses to screw up their own life, that's their choice. And until they harm somebody else, you have no business telling them otherwise. And if you're curious how the drug war has in fact made the situation worse for America as a whole, all one needs to do is look at alcohol prohibition in the 1920s. But if that's not enough, let me know, and I'd be happy to explain to you how outlawing these substances, forcing them into an unregulated black market, is actually more harmful than a regulated legal market. I'd be happy to share. Just let me know.